All right, so like I just said, there was, by the beginning of 1856, two governments in Kansas, an anti-slavery government and a pro-slavery government. And the springtime is going to bring the violence between these two groups. There is a judge who rules in 1856, early of that year, that, look, these people and the government of the anti-slavery government, the Free Soil government, they're not approved. They're not legitimate, and they have committed treason. And he indicts them all for treason. He says now they need to be rounded up and brought to the court. So now you have an excuse, a legal excuse, for the outlaws from Missouri to come back and start attacking free soilers and rounding them up. Okay, so that's what they do. Here they come. Again, the outlaws from Missouri. I don't know if any of you are from Missouri. I have nothing against that state, but they have some problems in their history. Like all of us and all of our states have problems. All right. Now, so here they come again. All right. And a lot of these people that are serving in the anti-slavery government are living in the city of Lawrence. And so the pro-slavery outlaws come and they besiege this town of Lawrence in Kansas on May 21st. And the Free State leaders back down. They're like, we don't want to have a war. It's better if we don't resist with violence right now. But the problem with that was that the pro-slavery faction was not interested in standing down. So as soon as the Free Soilers do not oppose the outlaws from Missouri, then the outlaws come into the town and burn it and plunder it. Bad. Okay. So you can't really work with these pro-slavery people out here in Kansas. It's not a good. You can't. There's no reasoning. Okay, happening. There's no negotiating. It's just violence. Okay. So all this is in the newspapers, right? Of course, and of course the abolitionist newspapers are definitely covering it all, and the southern newspapers are maybe there's different spin according to what newspaper you read, right? I've not read any. I don't know. I don't know what I'm. Forget it. Here we go. So I don't know what that was. Forgive it. Okay, forgive me. All right. So the Republicans. Sometimes you get tongue-tied as an adult. Okay. Hi. How are you? All right, so so let's move to Washington now. Oh, it's in the newspapers. Everyone's watching very carefully what's happening out in Kansas, right? There's a lot of important political consequences that are going to come from this for people in Washington. So everybody's looking at it carefully, okay? And of course they are. And of course there are bills produced both by the Republicans and by the Democrats that are promoting Kansas to become a state, either as a free state or a slave state. And none of these bills are going anywhere because the Republicans control the House of Representatives and the Democrats control the Senate, and they're not going to agree with each other. And so until you get a majority of one party in both houses, Kansas is stuck, okay? Because, no, they're not going to agree on whether it should be free or slave state. Okay, now, so these congressmen and these senators are facing off against each other in the Capitol, and also just like in the town of D.C. as well. And so you get the Massachusetts senator, Charles Sumner, when he hears about the attack on the town of Lawrence in Kansas by the pro-slavery outlaws. He gets up in the Senate and he gives this really impassioned speech condemning the violence and speaking out against the advocates of the pro-slavery faction in the Senate, anyone who is promoting the expansion of slavery in the West. And he condemns in particular, I believe it's a South Carolina senator, Andrew Butler, as being someone guilty, and someone who, I guess the implication being, I haven't read the speech of Sumner, forgive me, but the implication being that Butler's positions have somehow some connection to the violence, some inciting of the violence, whatever it is, I don't know. Okay, or just that the promotion of slavery is inherently violent, right? Okay, well, this, of course, is very irksome to the Southerners who don't like being criticized and don't like people talking about them. Okay, and so this other guy, Preston Brooks, who was a cousin of Andrew Butler, the guy that was criticized by Charles Sumner in the speech, that guy's cousin, name of Preston Brooks, I think he's also a congressman. He goes up to Charles Sumner in the Senate and beats him over the head with a cane like 20 or 30 times. Very violent. And it's a pretty debilitating for Sumner. For like 4 years, he can't go back to the Senate because he's like recovering from this beating. And he had some other like pre-existing thing that made it worse. But it was hard. Now, even though he's like debilitated, the people of Massachusetts re-elect him because it's like an act of defiance against the evil of slavery and the violence of Brooks and all that. They're going to stand up to the tyranny, right? They're going to re-elect Sumner. Okay, good. Now, that's good. Okay, the abolitionists, are warning. See, they're like, look, not only is this slavery thing evil, not only is it inherently violent, but the slave owners, the pro-slavery people do not allow dissent. They are tyrannous. They don't allow any dissent, okay? And they're pointing that out. All right. Now, Brooks gets fined $300. Okay, that's the punishment he gets there. Which is a lot of money at the time, I guess. But, I mean, if you almost, debilitate someone for more than 4 years, I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean, okay. So, we could probably say it's a pretty light sentence. Yeah. All right. Now... By this time, you're still in May of 1856, so you have the siege and sack of the town of Lawrence, Kansas. You have this fight in the Senate, like an actual fight with a cane in the Senate. And then now we'll go back to Kansas, and we're going to talk about this guy, John Brown, who came from, I think, Massachusetts. He'd been a wool merchant. He'd been in a number of things, not very successful, but he had a lot of children, very successful there, and had 20 children, and joined some of them who were already settlers out in Kansas, and of course who are free soil settlers. And when he's out here, and he, again, as I mentioned in the first lecture, is someone who is already kind of ready to meet violence with violence, right? But he's out here in Kansas, and he I believe he's actually on the way. He joins a military company out here, kind of an independent militia type thing with his sons. And I believe he was trying to go to Lawrence to maybe defend the town or whatever it was before it was sacked. But it all was sacked before he could get there. And when he heard about what had happened, he was of course outraged with the pro-slavery people. But he was also really angry at the people, the men in Lawrence, who did not stand up to the pro-slavery faction. And so he's like, no, you got to meet fire with fire, is what he says. And he goes even farther, and he says they have to strike terror into the hearts of the pro-slavery settlers. So he's going to try to basically mimic the tactics of the pro-slavery faction. All right. Now, he's also horrified at the news of the beating of Charles Sumner. And some reports say he's crazed by it, he's lost it. Okay, and he has this kind of creepy, mesmerizing gaze if you look at the photographs. Anyway, there's something going on. Anyway, he supports a good thing, of course, but his tactics he goes off the deep end, basically, is what it looks like to me. So what he decides to do, right, he says, look, there's been 5 free soilers murdered in the last, 2 years in Kansas. And so what he's going to do is he's going to avenge those murders, but not by attacking the people that are guilty of the murders or by, rounding them up and taking them before a judge or something like that. No, he's going to basically attack, he's going to attack people on the basis of being pro-slavery settlers, not on the basis of having engaged in a crime. So he's going to attack people in his own neighborhood. What is it called? I can't read right now. Pottawatomie. Okay. Pottawatomie. Okay. He's gonna attack Pottawatomie, where there's some pro-settler people living who have not engaged in violence, who don't own slaves. I don't think any of them do. Most of these like thugs that are coming in from Missouri who are pro-slavery don't actually own any slaves, right? Or most of the settlers that come in that support slavery don't own slaves. They just don't like Yankees, as they call it, moving out here to the West and telling them what to do, and they don't like the idea that Yankees like black people. Okay, they have problems, but they don't. Most of them don't own slaves. Anyway, he attacks this town, and he goes with his sons, and they abduct 5 men. I guess they're men. I think they're men. They abduct 5 people, and they murder them with a broadsword, like a big Scottish sword, like Braveheart. And that's May 24th, 25th. So within the space of like a few days, you've had the attack at Lawrence, you've had the beating of Charles Sumner in the Senate, and now you've had John Brown attacking these Pottawatomie pro-slavery settlers. And it's the idea here is, as far as I can tell, is just to strike terror into the heart of the pro-slavery faction, to use the same tactics, to use violence and intimidation in the same way that they were. Okay, and the massacre goes unpunished by law. The federal troops actually do arrest some of John Brown's sons, but it was the 2 ones who were not involved in the abduction and murder. So whatever. Okay, so really what's going on in Kansas is a kind of a breakdown of order as these 2 groups are coming together and fighting each other. And really, I mean, yeah, John Brown goes off deep in here a little bit, but it's really the pro-slavery people that are pushing the violent situation forward. All right, Juniors. Okay.